Europe is a land of ancient mystery. It's covered in thousands of ancient sites like standing stones, dolmens, stone circles, chambered mounds, megalithic temples, and circular earthworks. What do these sites mean, and what were they used for? In this video, I'll bring some of the evidence together to offer answers that can help unlock their mysteries. I'll show how they served a profound and important spiritual purpose, one that is timeless and is relevant to us even now. Some of these sites are among the oldest in the world, having been built as far back as around 7,000 or arguably even 11,000 years ago. Like silent sentinels standing amidst the bustle of our modern civilization, they represent a lost age of spirituality, very different to our own. With the passing of so much time, many events swept away the traditions surrounding them, so that today their true purpose and function is widely unknown. Yet clues remain in the old records of Europe and in the sites themselves. I'll look at their acoustic properties, some of the surviving folk traditions and rituals connected to them, analyse the meaning of their design and astronomical alignments, and compare their key features with ancient sites in other parts of the world. I'll even show how they relate to one of the most common experiences people reportedly have after death, in near-death experiences. I'll then bring all this together to put forward a comprehensive new theory of what these sites were built for. After 13 years of researching ancient sites across the globe and decades of having out-of-body experiences, we've got a new insight into these sites, which could completely change the way the world looks at them and has the potential to reawaken these sleeping giants so they can be used again for their original purpose. Everything I cover can be found in more detail with references in the book The Spiritual Out-of-Body Experience, which I co-authored with my husband Mark. In particular, it's part of our ancient Europe OBE theory. Maybe the legends of the past are true, and Europe was once a magical land where people crossed over into the other world and returned. Once known as portals to the other world, many of these sites are the vestiges of a lost religion where people journeyed to other realms. Perhaps one of the most significant findings from some ancient sites in Europe, which gives us a big clue as to their purpose, is that their inner chambers have acoustic properties. Studies have found that the chambers of some sites resonate at low frequencies that are inaudible but are known to have psychological effects. Others were found to resonate within a small band of frequency that's been discovered to have an effect on human brain activity. Chambered mounds are often thought to have been used as tombs for the dead, but these properties indicate they served a purpose for the living as places that could induce mystical experiences. The sound engineer Steve Marshall conducted acoustic experiments at a number of mounds and barrows, particularly West Kennet Long Barrow of the Avebury Complex in southwest England. He discovered that its passage resonates at 9 Hz. He also found signs of low-frequency resonance in the chambers of Newgrange and Fornox in Ireland, by Clodidad Agaos in Anglesey, and the 3 dolmens of Antequera in Spain. Certain brainwaves oscillate at 9 Hz. Marshall speculates that low chanting was used to resonate the passage of West Kennet Long Barrow in order to sympathetically induce brainwaves of the same frequency in people within its western chamber during rituals. Theta brainwaves oscillate between 4 to 8 Hz. Reproduce these in the stage between waking and sleeping, and also when awake but in a deeply relaxed state of mind. Alpha brainwaves oscillate between 8 to 12 Hz. These waves are produced when we're in a state of wakeful relaxation with our eyes closed. This state, where our mind is awake but our body is relaxed, is the condition most conducive to having out-of-body experiences, and indicates to us that the West Kennet Long Barrow's resonance of 9 Hz could have been designed to induce out-of-body experiences. Marshall came to a similar conclusion, stating, "The lowest resonances of the two have the power to induce sleep or trance, that mysterious region between waking and sleeping, between life and death, where the material world and the spirit world meet." He experimented by having someone sit in one of the chambers of West Kennet while it was made to resonate, and I'll return to the intriguing result of this later in the video. An earlier study published in 1996 on ancient chambered mounds in the British Isles also found they have acoustic properties. They studied the sites Wayland Smithy and Tune Coit in the UK, as well as Can L and Can I at Loughrea and Newgrange in Ireland. They found their inner chambers each sustained a strong resonance between 95 to 120 Hz, with most at 110 to 112 Hz. They proposed this was intentional and speculated that since these frequencies are within the adult male voice range, that chanting had been used to make them resonate during rituals. In some cases, they even found rock art within and on the exterior of the sites that resembled the chamber's acoustic patterns. Marshall similarly found that 2 of West Kennet Longbarrow's 5 chambers resonated at 110 Hz. A study was then done in 2008 to determine whether the frequencies found in these megalithic chambers had any effect on brain activity. In the study, 30 people listened to tones of 90, 100, 110, 120, and 130 Hz while their brain activity was monitored. At 110 Hz, the brain activity of the subjects differed significantly in comparison to the other frequencies. In summary, it shifted from left to right-sided dominance, which is generally associated with meditative and other altered states of consciousness. The study authors summarized their findings saying, "These intriguing pilot studies suggest that the acoustic properties of ancient structures may influence human brain function." A similar frequency has also been found in an ancient underground temple complex on the island of Malta in the Mediterranean. A study published in 2015 found that the so-called oracle room of the Haus Saflieni Hypogeum has features which indicate it had an acoustic purpose. It was found to resonate most at the frequencies of 70 Hz and 114 Hz, particularly in response to a male voice while chanting and singing in the oracle room. The sound from the oracle room travels throughout the complex to its other small chambers. I think the frequency of 114 Hz may have been used because it was found to be conducive to having out-of-body experiences. Some goddess figurines found at the Hypogeum were depicted sleeping or lying on couches, alluding to the out-of-body sleeping practices that could have gone on there. Rudi Tofetti, who has studied the site in great detail, also postulates that the dark and quiet lower levels of the Hypogeum were used for dream incubation and astral travel. This could explain the multiple small inner chambers built into the Hypogeum and many of Malta's other ancient temples where oracle holes are common. They may have enabled people to incubate dreams or to have out-of-body experiences in separate chambers at the same time. And the resonance from the oracle rooms projected into the chambers could have been used to facilitate these experiences. And so it seems that frequencies close to 110 Hz, which we've nicknamed the megalithic frequency, was specifically targeted by the builders of ancient megalithic sites in Europe, as well as frequencies within the alpha range, because they help someone to shift from an intellectually driven state of mind to one more receptive to mystical experiences, and we would say particularly to out-of-body experiences. These chambers appear to have been designed to facilitate sensory deprivation, as they are situated within mounds with very thick walls protecting them from the elements and making them very quiet, dark and temperate on the inside. This makes them well suited to having out-of-body experiences and incubating dreams. There have been numerous other acoustic studies conducted on other ancient sites in Britain, including chambered mounds and standing stone circles, which found they have special acoustic properties. Another ancient site that has an inner chamber that resonates at low frequencies is the Great Pyramid. NASA consultant and acoustic engineer Tom Danley discovered that its so-called King's Chamber resonates at frequencies between 0 and 20 Hz, even when there is nothing making noise inside it. This acoustic feature, shared with ancient sites in Europe, is not the only thing European sites and pyramids have in common, as we'll see further on. We now move on to some of the surviving folk memories surrounding these ancient sites. In Celtic and Norse religion, mounds were seen as gateways to the otherworld. For example, Dr. Gwilym Morris Baird of the channel Celtic Source says that stories preserved in Old Irish and Welsh texts reveal the Celts had believed the otherworld was located inside ancient chambered mounds and that the otherworld could be accessed by entering them. This doesn't seem to make sense until you understand how these ancient sites were used. When we did, it started to fit together perfectly. I believe these stories preserve a distant memory of how their inner chambers had once been used for having out-of-body experiences, in which people travelled to realms beyond the body. In ancient Norse religion, people sought visions from the other world by sitting or sleeping by mounds in a practice known as Utiseta. Expert in Norse mythology, Maria Kvilhaug, says this practice could involve an all-night meditation combined with sleep, which is one of the main ways to have an out-of-body experience. The practice of Utiseta, she says, led to a vision, usually in a place known as Svarvaland, meaning the land of sleep, which, as we explain in our book, is the place we go to out of the body when we sleep, the astral plane. This again indicates there was a strong connection between ancient mound sites and the out-of-body otherworld. Journeys to the otherworld became woven into European folklore. A careful examination of these stories reveals that some were based on an ancient system of initiation that was a key part of Celtic and Germanic society. We realized it had involved having out-of-body experiences, and as I'll explain, is intimately connected to ancient European sites. In the most central event of Norse tradition, the god Odin hangs on the world tree Yggdrasil for 9 days and nights. This tree was believed to stand at the center of the cosmos as a cosmic axis, where it connected the physical world and the numerous non-physical worlds of Norse cosmology together. Thus, it was believed to be the place where one could travel to them. And so while on the tree, Odin has a kind of near-death experience and travels out of his body to visit some of these non-physical realms. Kvilhaug believes this event portrays an initiation that many men in Norse society underwent as a rite of passage, in which they would travel to the dimension of the afterlife and return. It's worth mentioning that in Old Norse sources, Odin was known to have the ability to astral project, and that people generally were believed to have the ability to travel out of their body. This out-of-body initiation was the most important rite in the Norse initiations of Odin, and Kvilhaug recognized that many stories in the Eddas encoded. These stories describe how the initiate entered the underworld realm of the goddess, where they endured a series of trials, having to overcome things like hatred, rage, and greed, and to prove their esoteric knowledge before being served mead by a priestess of the sun within a burial mound, referred to as Sun Cauldron Woman. This mead was held in cauldrons representing the wells of knowledge and regeneration found in the underworld. The initiate then sought to access the heavenly realm of the afterlife, and upon their return was said to have been resurrected and been spiritually reborn. Kvilhaug says this initiation is clearly illustrated in the poems about King Helgi from the Poetic Edda. They begin with the king and his Earl Atli, whose name means magician, sage, or priest, going on a spiritual quest to the other world of Svarvaland by going to sleep and dreaming. Kvilhaug says this is really the poetic retelling of the initiation of a king, and that Norse text strongly suggests that especially Germanic kings had to go through a great initiation before they were accepted to their position, as they were expected to be semi-divine and to possess esoteric knowledge. The journey the initiate made to Svarvaland and the heavenly realm of the afterlife clearly sounds like an out-of-body experience to me. Travelling to the other world was a rite of passage for the Celtic kings, just as it was for the Norse kings, as both cultures were based on the same ancient tradition. For example, in an old Irish text, the High King of Ireland, Cormac, is led after a series of trials by the god Manannán mac Lir into the heavenly otherworld called the Land of Promise, where he bathes in the Fountain of Knowledge. This fountain is the equivalent of the wells of knowledge in Norse tradition. Cormac then falls asleep, meets spiritual-like beings, receives a number of symbolic spiritual teachings, and then awakes back in Ireland. The anthropologist Walter Evans Wentz interpreted this tale as a symbolic and poetic retelling of the initiation of an Irish king. Great ancient passage mounds like those of Knowth and Newgrange in Ireland contain inner stone chambers where these initiations were surely held. I think they clearly involved having out-of-body experiences, especially since Cormac had much of his experience while asleep. It's possible to receive symbolic teachings from spiritual beings while in an out-of-body experience, as Cormac did. A reference to this initiation is found in the old writings of the Druidic bard Taliesin. His writings preserve some of the few surviving references to ancient Druid beliefs, and it's believed that he symbolically recounts the initiation of the Druids. Taliesin says that he was swallowed by the goddess Cerridwen and entered her womb, an underworld realm where he underwent a mystical death and drank from her cauldron before being reborn. This initiation shares many similarities with that of the Norse and correlates to the structure of European mounds which were built as representations of the womb of the Great Mother Goddess. It also shares similarities with the initiations of Egypt, as there the initiate was also said to have been swallowed by the goddess, travelling through her womb before being reborn as the rising sun. In one of Taliesin's poems, he describes the journey kings made to the otherworld during this initiation. He describes the portal to the otherworld, a Nuven, opening before a cauldron. The cauldron belongs to the king of the otherworld and is surrounded by 9 virgins, who are likely the priestesses that guarded it. In the poem, King Arthur and his men travel through the portal, which alludes to the ancient tradition in which kings had to undergo this out-of-body initiation. As the poem suggests, it took courage to embark upon the journey to the otherworld, and the portal must have been entered in darkness as lamps were needed for light. I'd say the darkness was likely due to being inside a dark chamber within an ancient European mound. In Welsh lore, a Nuven is described just as heaven is in other traditions and in near-death experiences, as a beautiful, abundant place of eternal youth, free of suffering and disease. Glastonbury Tor, an ancient artificially shaped hill in England, could have been the location of this or a similar initiation, as it was seen as a portal to the other world of a Nuven, and was associated with a Nuven's king, Gwynap Nudd, and with King Arthur. Given that it's known as a portal to the other world, we wondered whether there is an ancient initiatory chamber still undiscovered within it. As it turns out, legend has it that inside Glastonbury Tor there is a hidden cave in which the king of a Nuven resides with the cauldron of rebirth, and through this cave one can pass into a Nuven. And so there probably really was once a chamber beneath Glastonbury Tor used for inducing out-of-body experiences. And I think the poem of the Druidic bard Taliesin is one of the few remaining references to it, and other chambers like it. I believe the sources indicate that this initiation involving an out-of-body experience was held inside the chambers of some of the ancient chambered mounds of Europe, which, as we'll see, represented the womb of the goddess and her realm. Very large cauldrons were found in a number of ancient European chambered mounds and temples, which correlate to the cauldrons that played a central part of the initiation. There are vast numbers of chambered mounds in Europe, and I think a reason for this could be that they were built to accommodate the men of each settlement who had to undergo this initiation as a rite of passage before assuming a role in society. Irish scholar Thomas Francis O'Rahilly wrote that in pagan Ireland, every important district had its own mound in which the otherworld was believed to be located. Out-of-body experiences then were not just a secret practice of a small number, but a vital part of society. Though the ancient sites of Europe come in different types, I believe many are based on the same fundamental design, which has a profound spiritual meaning related to their purpose as places used for having out-of-body experiences. I'll start by looking at the design of ancient passage mounds, also known as chambered cairns, and then show how they relate to stone circles and earthen henges, and to ancient sites in other parts of the world. Passage mounds such as Newgrange essentially consist of a large mound of earth with a passageway that leads inside the mound into one or more inner stone chambers. This passageway was often aligned to sunrise or sunset on a solstice or equinox so that it allowed sunlight to enter into the inner chambers at these specific times. The earthen mound represented the womb of the mother goddess. For example, the Gaelic name for Newgrange is Brunaboyne, which can be translated as the womb of the goddess Buin. The interior chambers are therefore located within the womb of the Mother Earth goddess, and the passageway is her birth canal. When this canal is directed toward the sun, it represents rebirth into the other world of heaven. The ancient stone temples of Malta have a similar design. One of the main finds at these temples has been a large number of Mother Goddess figurines. The layout of many Maltese temples emulates these figurines, as their design follows the curves of their bodies. Like passage mounds, their inner chambers symbolically created the interior of the Mother Goddess. Also like mounds, many of Malta's temples were aligned to the sun at the solstices and equinoxes, and to the stars. Lenny Riedick discovered that all those with mapped ground plans aligned to the star Sirius, which is the brightest star in the sky. In some of Malta's temples, the light of the solstice or equinox sun, or Sirius, shines down their central passageway or through a hole in the temple's wall into an inner chamber, just as in the passage mounds of Europe. There are no surviving records in Malta that tell us what these alignments mean, but I believe the records of ancient Egypt provide the answer. Sirius was very important to the ancient Egyptians, who saw it as representing the great mother goddess Isis. However, as a translator of the pyramid text Susan Brind-Morrow found, it also represented the Egyptian king as he travelled out of his body after death in the form of a falcon of light to heaven. I believe that in Malta, as in Egypt, Sirius may have represented the soul of the initiate who lay inside the temple as a soul travelled out of the body to heaven. There is more to this Egyptian connection, as these European sites not only share similarities with one another, but I realise they also share similarities with pyramids in Egypt. The Egyptologist James P. Allen writes how in Egypt, pyramids were symbols of the womb of a great mother goddess. They too had a small inner stone chamber that was accessed by a single passageway, and this passageway likewise symbolised her birth canal. The beginning of these passageways typically first led east out of the chamber in the direction of sunrise, similar to the passages of ancient European sites. However, in pyramids, these passages then turn north to exit the pyramid in alignment with the northern circumpolar stars, as the Egyptians saw this region of the sky as a location of heaven. Allen says that pyramids were a kind of device built to facilitate the king's out-of-body journey to heaven after death. However, we believe some pyramids, like the Great Pyramids, were used for secret initiatory rituals in which people made this journey out of the body in life and returned, just as in ancient Europe. It appears that a number of standing stone circles, particularly those in the British Isles, are based on this same design. They essentially consist of a circle with an opening or avenue aligned to sunrise at a solstice or equinox. For example, at sunrise on the summer solstice at Stonehenge, the sun shines down an avenue that would have once been flanked by a corridor of upright stones into the centre of the circle. The same thing happens at the largest stone circle in Callanish in Scotland. I think some stone circles are the equivalent of circular mounds and their avenues equivalent to the passageways within mounds. Some of these stone circles, like Stonehenge, were built within a henge, which is a circular earthwork consisting of a ditch and embankment. These henges are found across parts of Europe, with Goseck Circle in Germany being one of the older examples, dating back to around 5000 BC. Goseck Circle has an opening aligned to winter solstice sunrise and shares a number of other astronomical features with Stonehenge that reveals the two sites are connected. These same types of circular earthworks are also found in the Americas. Researchers such as Graham Hancock and Dr. Jennifer Watling have noted that some of the henges in the Americas share similarities and even identical features with those in Britain and date to the same time periods. I believe solving the meaning of these ancient henge sites in North America helps to unlock the meaning of henges in Europe. The largest of these kinds of earthworks are found in Ohio in the United States, where they are part of the Newark Earthworks Complex. Among those who have studied the Newark earthworks the most is William Romaine, an American archaeologist and archaeoastronomer. He's demonstrated that the design of Newark's earthworks corresponds to Native American beliefs and has done much to decode their meaning and purpose. He says that in Native American lore, circles were used to symbolize the earth, and thus the circular earthworks were intended to represent the circular island of Earth afloat in the waters of the cosmos. Some were even surrounded by moats to symbolize these waters. There are indications that circular henges in Europe were likewise built as a symbol of Earth. For example, the researcher Randall Carlson discovered that the perimeter of Stonehenge's inner circle of blue stones encodes the diameter of the Earth, and the perimeter of the outer sarsen stones encodes the radius of the Moon. This is yet another similarity with sites in ancient Egypt, as the Great Pyramid encodes dimensions of the Earth, including its radius, making it essentially a kind of mathematical replica of it. These sites were not only symbols of the womb of the Great Mother Earth goddess, but of planet Earth itself. The mound, stone circle, henge, temple, and pyramid were symbols of the Earth, which was seen as the realm of the Mother Earth goddess. The sun was a symbol of heaven, realm of the Father Sky God. The passageway, avenue, and opening of these sites connected these two realms together. On one level, this could be seen as the path of the sun, the path to enlightenment, which leads someone from earth to heaven. But it also has another meaning. In April last year, I happened to glance at a photo looking out from the inside of the Chamber of Mace Howe in Scotland, which is an ancient passage mound aligned to winter solstice sunset. As I did, it suddenly occurred to me that the effect of looking out the narrow stone passage from within the chamber toward the sun created the same visual effect as travelling through the dark tunnel into the light of heaven, commonly seen in near-death experiences. This is perhaps one of the most reported experiences that people who've died and revived said they went through. They describe floating away from their bodies, usually up into the sky, and then into a large dark tunnel that seems to travel through the sky, space, and stars. At the end of this tunnel is a light which greets them as they enter a beautiful garden that they describe as heaven. They usually feel this light as the source, creator, or God, and often compare it to the sun, though say it's thousands of times brighter. In ancient chambered mounds that are aligned to sunrises, the increase of the sun's light as it rose and entered the passageway would have mimicked this experience, making the light appear to get closer and brighter to those inside, just as it does during near-death experiences, as one travels toward the light through the tunnel. Ancient people also had near-death experiences, as we document in our book, The Spiritual Out-of-Body Experience. Travelling through the tunnel towards the light and into heaven is likely to have been a common experience in ancient times, just as it is today. What's remarkable is that this tunnel really exists. We realized it's actually a portal that leads from what's known as the astral plane or fifth dimension to the higher realm of heaven, which can be seen in out-of-body experiences. This is why so many people see it and experience it in the same way. We then discovered that a number of ancient cultures knew about this portal and gave it a name. In ancient Egypt, it was known as the Akhet, and the symbol of it, found among Native American cultures, is today called the Ogier. We propose that many ancient sites in Europe were built to symbolize this portal from earth to heaven, and sought to send someone through it during out-of-body experiences from within their inner chambers. I believe they were also used for the dead in an attempt to send them to heaven in the afterlife, which was why so many ancient sites in Europe could be both ritual places used by the living and burial places used for the dead, with their use for the dead possibly having developed later. Realizing and putting all this together, I believe, is key to unlocking the meaning of ancient sites in Europe and also in Egypt. For instance, we realized that in both Europe and Egypt they built structures that emulated the portal to heaven and even sought to send someone through this portal in out-of-body experiences from within their stone chambers. In both places, pyramids and mounds were used as tombs for the elite. In Egypt, these pyramidal tombs were said to send the deceased king through the portal to heaven, and it seems likely that some of the burial mounds of Europe were built to serve the same purpose, as for example, what is speculated to have been the burial of a king who was believed to have been semi-divine, like the pharaohs of Egypt, was found within Newgrange of Ireland. However, these sites were also sometimes used as communal burial places. For instance, Stonehenge became one of the largest burial sites in Britain. Thousands of human remains were found in the Hal Saflieni Hypogeum in Malta, and the surrounds of the Great Pyramids became a giant cemetery. To me, this indicates these sites were commonly understood as portals to heaven, with many people wanting to be buried near them as a result, in the hope of securing their passage to heaven after death. We're not the only ones to propose that ancient sites were used as portals. Rudy Tafeti speculates that the Hypogeum was a portal toward otherworldly dimensions, and that its central chamber could have been used by initiates who worked with the astral forces. William Romaine concludes this was the purpose of Newark earthworks too, saying that they were likely to have been considered gateways to the otherworld. He says that building structures that created an entrance to the otherworld was common practice throughout North America. For instance, circular holes at the top of lodges and tents were meant to link heaven and earth, allowing for soul travel to the spiritual realm. Perhaps creating a real portal sounds too far out to be true, but this is reportedly what happened during one of the acoustic experiments conducted by Steve Marshall. A 14-year-old boy volunteered to sit in West Kennett Longbarrow's western chamber while the passage was made to resonate using a drum. Marshall says, the boy later reported that with eyes open, he could just make out the end stones of the western chamber, which at first appeared to be moving slightly. On one stone of the back wall, a small black circle appeared, which grew in size. It took on the appearance of a passage leading to another chamber. He then continued to listen with eyes closed and was convinced that on 2 occasions someone had joined him in the chamber, but he had been entirely alone. It's incredible the boy said he saw what sounds like a portal open up and then felt the presence of non-physical beings. He may have perceived something of the astral otherworld with the help of the Barrows resonance. According to Morian Morgan, who was a Welsh writer on Druidic religion, the Druids believed the entrance to heaven was located where the sun reached its height at the summer solstice. This same belief is echoed in ancient British traditions, as according to Robert Graves, at the summer solstice, the Oak King, god of light, was said to leave Earth to travel to the Corona Borealis constellation in the northern sky, which was seen as a heavenly castle. This indicates he ascended to and entered heaven at the summer solstice. Graves also writes that the sacred Sun Kings of Ireland, who ruled during the Bronze Age, had likewise sought to ascend to this heavenly castle after death. This ties in with our theory that ancient sites in Europe were designed and used to facilitate the journey to heaven. It particularly ties in with the design of Stonehenge, which is aligned to summer solstice sunrise, as being a symbolic gateway leading from the earth to heaven. Larger and more open sites like Stonehenge may have been used for large public ceremonies at the solstices, based on the belief that they acted as gateways to heaven, allowing the deceased through in one direction as they departed from earth, but also the light of the spiritual sun from heaven to earth toward the living. The design of these sites and their meaning is also connected to the symbol of the cosmic axis, found in cultures across much of the world. In Europe, it could be portrayed as a sacred pillar like the Germanic Irminsul, as a maypole, or a sacred tree. This axis was believed to stand at the center of creation, where it connected all the realms of the cosmos together. It was believed that our physical realm was located at the trunk. Beneath the earth, at the roots, was the non-physical realm of the underworld or hell. Above, in the branches, was the non-physical realm of heaven in the sky. At the very top was the sun, as the light of the source, which is often why a symbol of the sun can top a pagan European pillar or pole. I noticed that some ancient European sites follow this same general template, with the mound or circle as the earth and the avenue or passage as the axis, which is aligned to the sun as it rises over the horizon as though at its peak. Because the axis was believed to connect all the realms together, it was also believed to be the place where one could travel between them. This is why I think some European sites were designed to symbolize the cosmic axis and were used as places to travel to other realms. After researching ancient sites across the world, I believe this cosmic axis was synonymous with the tunnel that people travel through in near-death experiences, going upward into heaven and downward into hell. This tunnel was also synonymous with the mouth, body and birth canal of a great mother goddess, which is why mound sites in Europe were built as her womb. We have presented this information as our ancient Europe OBE theory, which we detail in our book, The Spiritual Out-of-Body Experience. As we've seen, ancient sites in Europe, Egypt, and North America share some remarkable similarities. These similarities derive from a common source, which we call the ancient religion of the sun, that spread across the world long before the emergence of historically known civilizations. These sites are also based on common experiences people had while out of the body in other realms, where they saw things that really exist. It appears this knowledge was then used to design ancient sites that could facilitate these experiences. The ancient sites of Europe were part of a once global effort to build places that served as gateways to non-physical realms. As we've seen, these gateways were used for the dead, as they were believed to be access points they could use to reach heaven in their journey into the afterlife. But they also served purposes for the living. Some appear to have been used for having out-of-body experiences, particularly during an ancient initiation ritual that was once central to European society. A gate is something that allows movement in both directions, and so it's possible these sites were also seen as places where the things of non-physical realms could come to earth, like the spiritual light and energies of the sun that so many of them were aligned to. Europe was once a land of magic and mystery, where people traveled to the other world and returned, bringing back with them a great knowledge and wisdom gained from what they experienced. Although today ancient European sites are often damaged to some degree, there are many that are preserved enough to function as they once did. We hope that by bringing back the understanding of what they were built to symbolize and were used for, that some of the most important ancient spiritual practices of Europe can be rekindled, and that people will again use these ancient sites for the purposes they were originally built for. We've covered a lot in this video, but these sites still have another layer of meaning I wasn't able to touch on, as it requires its own explanation. It's a more hidden spiritual level, which is important to know to fully understand them. So if you'd like to delve even further, I recommend watching this video about their alignments to the winter solstice, where I explain this deeper layer of symbolism.